Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you can all hear me. I can see some of your faces, so just wave or send me a chat if you're having problems. It's great to have you all join us today with the electric vehicle webinar. Just a couple of housekeeping things before I hand over to Martin Borges, Operations Manager for LGA Procurement. My name's Jane Virgo. If I haven't met you before, lovely to have you with us. I have muted you all just for the sake of a quiet presentation. We of course invite all questions, so pop them in the chat and there is questions at the end of the presentations. If you're new to Zoom, as some of you may be, you have two views that you can choose from, speaker or gallery or grid. So if you're wanting to look just at the person presenting with their presentation, just select speaker view. As I said, questions at the end. The agenda today, we're going to have presentations by Alex with the EV Council, also presentation by City of Port Adelaide Enfield, and Martin will speak with us now. Over to you, Martin. I might need to make you co-presenter. Might be a tick, everyone.
Cool, no, I got it. Good morning, everyone. And yeah, certainly echo Jane's comments too. It's great to see so many of you on board, and certainly extend the welcome on behalf of our CEO, Andrew Haste, and the rest of our team. It's great to be able to engage with so many of you on this really important topic. Look, the electric vehicle conversation is a really interesting one, and we're finding that it's becoming more and more topical, both from an elected member point of view, but also we're seeing that more and more staff are actively looking to support council's commitment to reducing their carbon footprint, but also, in that they're looking to, the next 10 years of the plant and asset life cycles, and what does that mean in terms of fossil fuel vehicles, and how is that landscape going to change, both in terms of long-term financial management plans and also operational issues for the staff that are using these tools every day. So the EV landscape in South Australia, it's as far as councils are concerned, we've got some really great commitment from councils in as far as there's a lot of hybrid vehicles running around the place at the moment. So everything from the Mitsubishi plug-in hybrids through to the Camrys, which have been around for a long time. So there is an understanding and an appetite of the potential that hybrid vehicles, and also more importantly electric vehicles, are able to add to council activities. But as far as dedicated 100% electric vehicles in the sector, is very slow uptake, and I guess that's built around a lot of uncertainty around cost of ownership, increased purchase fees, and so hopefully today we'll be able to give you some information and tools to be able to support some of those business cases that you'll have to present to the Chamber and your senior management to be able to get some traction on and possibly implementing electric vehicles in your business and council. So the general community feeling around is everyone is well on board that electric vehicles are the way of the future. But as far as how do they look in a practical sense from implementation with staff, actually getting them on board, supporting them with infrastructure for charging, maintenance and that sort of stuff, there's a lot of, apprehension around those conversations, because it is such a emerging technology, and it's moving at such a pace. It's quite interesting to see how rapidly everything is evolving. So the conversation around the majority of the sector is that we're really in a fork in the road. We've got all these major assets changing over on a regular basis. We've got long-term plans in place that support the delivery of services in line with the assets that we've currently got. But how does that look? If we're looking to buy a new truck that potentially has a lifespan of 10 years, what's the value of that going to look like in 10 years' time? Or, where is the council's pressure and the community pressure going to be around us reducing our carbon footprint as we sort of approach the end of the life cycle of that vehicle as well? So it's a really interesting point to be at the moment. And we had a really interesting field trip that some of you are present on. We went over to the SEA factory in Melbourne. Andrew Haste, our CEO, led us across there to discover more and sort of start to understand and dispel some of the myths around these electric vehicles. And I guess the overarching thing that came from my experience with that is that You know, this particular company is the only one that's doing a conversion that's backed by factory warranties now. And the biggest takeaway, I think, was that the plant and equipment that they are converting is exactly the same as currently is being used within your councils, except it's 100% electric. So as far as culture and operational use of these major assets, it's exactly the same as what you're currently using. It's just that additional consideration of, well, we don't have any fossil fuels or greases or fossil-based consumables in these vehicles anymore, apart from the tyres, and that they are really supporting, number one, a really massive environmental reduction in significant reduction, in the carbon footprint of the councils that are putting these vehicles in place, but also the publicity opportunities that come around with councils being early adopters of this machinery and supporting the greater global conversation around carbon reduction as well is proving really valuable for councils. The other comment that I took away from that trip, which I thought was quite pertinent, was the fact that these vehicles do cost more to purchase initially, and people seem to be able to get really bogged down in the cost of ownership and how does it compare to the current trucks, for instance, that we run at the moment. And I guess the challenge that I would put out there is that, you know, on a regular basis, we think nothing of buying, you know, a new plant or machine that's, you know, worth $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000. It's just, this is what we need to do the job. And in that same fashion, I would put to you guys that, you know, buying an electric vehicle, yes, it is initially more expensive, and there are savings to be made through fuel and consumables, but, you know, we need to flip it on its head and look at it from a point of view that electric vehicles, we will pay a premium for them, but they're just a different tool that we employ to deliver the services that we currently do to our communities. And so therefore they should be probably considered more intensely in their own right as a separate asset, as opposed to trying to look at justification of, oh, well, we can have a break-even point where it's the same to run as a diesel truck. You know, so it's all good. There's no issue or no risk with jumping into an electric vehicle. I think we have to support the conversation around that this is a commitment environmentally, but also to our sector, that we can still deliver the same outcomes with these machines. It's just a different cost associated with jumping in and employing those machines as well. So today, as Jane said, we'll hear from the Electric Vehicle Council of Australia. So they've got some really good tools around cost of ownership and purchase and leasing costs with electric vehicles. And also it's really great to have Port Adelaide Enfield, who have actually already placed their first order for an electric truck, to come and talk to us about the conversations that they experienced when they were putting that business case up to their senior management as well. In saying that, probably the business side of me needs you guys to know that purchasing and implementing these machines, trucks, vehicles doesn't have to be a complicated thing. We've got managed contracts already that look after all of the suppliers for hybrid cars and electric cars, but also plant machinery and trucks now as well. And we've also got quite an extensive solar panel offering that can help you understand with consultants and also installing solar panels how many vehicles that they can support and what kind of infrastructure you need as well, and how that can support the implementation of electric vehicles in your fleet as well. So all of those panels that we currently have under our managed contracts have already undertaken an open process. So they all fulfil council's basic requirements in doing that open value process for high value assets. So it just frees you guys up to be able to just go straight in and say, hey, I want a quote, or I want a consultant to be able to support us and tell us what we need to do to make that transition. And when you're ready to buy a vehicle, that be assured that all of that assessment and qualification process has already been undertaken, and you can focus on putting your request out there to achieve an outcome, as opposed to getting bogged down in all the assessment and all the qualification that comes with that open sort of a process. So with that, I won't bore you anymore. I'd like to hand over to Alex from the Electric Vehicle Council. Really thank her for her time. She's been doing some quite a bit of work catching up with us and supporting some of the decisions that you know, we're looking to make in our business, and we hope yeah, I know you'll get some value from her presentation as well. Thanks, Alex.
Cool, thanks Martin. Hi everyone, as I was introduced, I'm Alex, I'm from the Electric Vehicle Council. I work in policy and comms, but in the last year I've been working on something to do with fleets, fleet transition, and a program that will hopefully help you make the business case in a really short amount of time. By way of introduction to electric vehicles, I'm just going to give a little bit of context for the Australian market. So one thing we know in Australia is that, you know, the cost of vehicles are high, but what we are seeing is a global trend that diesel and petrol vehicle sales are decreasing. Additionally, we're seeing that EV sales are increasing. So in the last year, we've seen a threefold increase in the number of electric vehicle sales in Australia. That's driven predominantly by fleet purchases in the lower price vehicle segments. And that's because we're starting to see a really strong increase in model availability. So the demand that Australian fleet owners are showing for lower price electric vehicles is driving the allocation of these vehicles to our markets. And so we've got a really positive relationship with manufacturers in that we're saying, you know, that there is appetite for this technology and there's appetite to reduce carbon emissions. So bring us the cars that can help us do it. You'll see here that we've got, you know, two price segments. And unfortunately, that lower price segment is more limited than the higher price segment, but that doesn't mean there aren't vehicles there that are fit for purpose and really are fulfilling the needs of fleets in councils and corporates across Australia. The cost of an electric vehicle is a significant barrier for many people. And just for background on that, the reason they are costing so much at the moment is because of the price of lithium. So as we see lithium-ion batteries decrease, then we will see that the cost of an electric vehicle will come down. Banking up 50% of the current vehicle price means that you are paying a premium for the new technology as you would with other new technologies. I mean, you get the new iPhone, you're paying a premium, but gradually as new models come in and as we see the technology develop, we also reap the benefit of that technological change. So we have projections here that show the cost of EVs will reach price parity by about 2024, 2025. Now, that's a really important consideration when we think about, okay, well, why should I wait? Should I wait? Should I wait? And it won't really be a point of waiting. It's we want to start leading. We're doing this for carbon emissions reduction, and we're doing this to set an example. Our communities are asking for it, and we're starting to see that, you know, climate declarations and council mandates are dictating the way that we use vehicles and what, you know, they're emitting into our atmosphere and in our streets. So the 2024 price parity point is for markets additionally where we have a really positive policy environment. One thing that we are lacking in Australia at the moment is a national electric vehicle strategy. Now the federal government has indicated this is likely to come out in the next few months, and we're hopeful that it will, but without a positive policy environment, we won't actually see this price parity point until we have mass market sales. So waiting for price parity doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it in 2024, which is why it's really important to begin the transition now. Charging infrastructure is, you know, a key issue. It's something that we need to do to alleviate range anxiety, not only for fleets, but also for residents. I mean, in your municipalities, having charging infrastructure that's publicly accessible is a really important way to get your community on board with the new technology and also demonstrate your leadership in this space. So in the last couple of years, we've seen a really significant increase in public charging infrastructure. You'll see here that we've got DC charging stations, and this is what we call, you know, the fast chargers. You might have these in on highways, you might have them at, you know, peak traffic points. And then you've got AC charging stations. So these are more chargers that you'll have at local facilities, maybe swimming pools, maybe libraries, and everywhere where you might have a 1 to 2 hour break, you can plug in your car for a little bit and then continue on your way. It's likely that AC chargers are the ones that you'll start using to you know, power up your fleet vehicles. And there'll be new ways to manage how you refuel, but one of the great things about electric vehicles is you can actually do it back at depot. So you don't necessarily need fuel cards anymore. You could really bring all the cars back and have one management system to make sure that all the vehicles are prepared for what they need to do that day and the next day. So we know that there's, you know, significant benefits for electric vehicles from an environmental perspective, but I think a really important consideration is what else can electric vehicles bring to our communities. Now, we conducted research last year that demonstrated each electric vehicle in New South Wales, that's the Newcastle, Wollongong, Sydney region, would save $2,400 in health costs, We also determined through, government data that people in New South Wales, 650 more people are dying from emissions than they are dying from vehicle accidents. So the environmental benefit is a really important consideration, but when we consider how we're living and how we're using our community spaces, we need to recognise the additional benefits that a zero emissions fleet will have. Current attitudes towards electric vehicle ownership in Australia are changing. We're seeing now that 100% of people have heard of electric vehicles, 45% would consider. We're still making headway in that space. We're about to release new data on consumer attitudes in our next State of Electric Vehicles report in the next month or so. So I'll make sure to send that to Jane so she can get that out to you, and you can see, what's happening in the community space as well. From an industry development opportunity in South Australia, there's obviously, you've got the battery side of things. You're considering raw material mining and processing. Charging manufacture. It's a whole new world that we can really start to incentivise jobs and development in the green economy. So post-COVID, you might be considering, what infrastructure projects can you do to get your stimulus measures started? And electric vehicles is a really forward-thinking way and progressive way to start creating jobs and facilitating the uptake of electric vehicles. Each state, as well as an overarching federal policy, mandates or has their own strategies in place to encourage the adoption of electric vehicles. Now, South Australia already has one, but there will be a new EV action plan released this year in July and August. We've been working quite closely with them on that to see what they can do to help fleets in terms of, incentivising adoption. How can they help co-investment of charging infrastructure, and what other projects can they create in your state that will encourage the uptake? This is something taken from the New South Wales government strategy released in the net zero plan. So this was released a couple of months ago, and there is, a really important investment there in what fleets can do. And I'm only showing you this to really demonstrate, the impact that fleets can have on the electric vehicle market and their communities. So vehicle fleet owners in New South Wales will be able to participate in a reverse auction where they'll get funding from the government to help them buy a certain number of electric vehicles. This strategy is still underway, but it's just, one of the ways in which governments are starting to look to how can we help fleet owners and local governments really achieve their vision of becoming carbon neutral fleet operators. As I said, it will be released this year. So why is it important that councils start leading the way in this space? Well, 94 of you have made climate declarations in Australia, and an Australian council was the first in the world to actually declare a climate emergency. The change is already happening. We're seeing more and more that communities and companies are asking for change and, ways to protect the environment. And so leading the charge on the investment in new zero emissions technology is a really important way to do that. As we've discussed earlier, a lot of emissions from council comes from transport, be it garbage trucks or be it fleet vehicles. And so it really is a way to accelerate the decrease in emissions that you currently have. Now, it's all well and good to talk about, what are the positives of electric vehicles, but, we've identified time and time and again that it's a new technology, so we don't necessarily know everything about it. And additionally, there's a high upfront purchase cost. In the last year, the Electric Vehicle Council has been working on this program called Charge Together Fleets. Now, it's a free program and it includes Better Fleet, which I'm going to take you through in a moment, a knowledge base, a webinar series, and a community centre. So the idea of this program is we want to facilitate knowledge sharing and collaboration across fleets in Australia so that we're no longer starting from ground zero every time we want to consider electric vehicle transition. The program was developed with Energy and funded by the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, the South Australian Government, Ausgrid, the NRMA, and the New South Wales Government. The program and Better Fleet was built with fleet managers and sustainability managers from councils. So it does what you've asked us to do. It's not that we've inferred what you might need and where it comes from. We've actually had significant input and it reiterated and redeveloped the program to suit the needs of fleet and sustainability managers who are considering how to make long-term transitions to electric vehicle fleets. We additionally had input from AFMA and the Cities Power Partnership and the IPWEA. So what is Better Fleet? Better Fleet is the 15-minute how to make a business case tool. Now we've created something that is easy, quick, and efficient at making the business case so that you can get the transition moving. It incorporates vehicles from, you know, the combined vehicle list of New South Wales, South Australian, Victorian governments. It's got emissions intensity, it supports tax, you can allocate pricing for electricity and charging infrastructure, and allows for green energy purchasing. So the considerations when you're using the tool, you're going to need a little bit of fleet data. You're going to need to consider like-for-like vehicle comparison. And you might also need to consider, you know, where are you currently procuring your energy? I'm just going to take you now through the tool because I think that's the best way to become familiar with it. So what we have here is the homepage for Charge Together Fleets. You can join the program here. It's completely free, as I mentioned before. You're not tied into anything. It is just a free resource to help you on your way. Within the Charge Together Fleets program, you've got Educate, which is a knowledge base to help you make the determination and gain insight into what the electric vehicle world is. I've opened up this article, How to Effectively Compare Fleet Vehicles, because I think this is a really important point when you're looking at electric vehicle comparison is, you know, how are you comparing cars? A lot of people think electric vehicle, Tesla. Okay, and that's all well and good, but that's probably not a vehicle that is comparative with the majority of vehicles in your fleet. So what we've done is identified issues like comparing like-for-like vehicles or how to make the business case, and created a knowledge base so that when you have questions like that, you can hopefully go and find the answers. You've got webinars on here as well, so you'll have lots of people from different councils in Australia talking about issues, you know, future proofing. You've got webinars on waste collection. We're actually having a lot of webinars at the moment from the OEMs. So we've had Renault, last week we had Tesla, in 2 weeks we'll have Hyundai. And the context of those webinars is their vehicles for fleets. So it's really driving and making the case for electrification and how it can work now. So we'll move through to the Better Fleet platform. Better Fleet is the 15-minute business case tool. Okay, so you'll enter here. If it's your first time, a video will pop up explaining to you again how to use the tool. Hopefully you'll be experts after this, but if not, then you've always got a reminder. Now what you'll do is you'll create a project. You'll use your input data to make comparisons of different vehicles within one scenario. So what I've selected here is an annual driving distance of 12,000 kilometres, just as an example, and I've chosen a 5-year operational lease term based on the current lease terms people are using for electric vehicles in Australia. So I enter my location. I'm putting in 2000 because I'm in Sydney, but it's important you put, you know, the correct details in because the tool itself has data input from state-specific tax and that type of thing. So we'll now move into the vehicles to compare. The settings that you use to create your projects are important. So there are default settings, so how much you're paying for fuel, diesel, or a public charger if you're comparing a pre-existing electric vehicle. Electricity consumption, so how much do you charge? How much are you charged for your electricity? Is it off peak? Is it on peak? Are you using renewable energy to power council buildings, and therefore will you use that electricity supplying charge to electric vehicles in the future? This is all manually toggleable. Otherwise, it is based on the assumptions that come from the postcodes you input at that first point in time. So here we've got the operational lease terms, 5 years. Questions about tax, companies, and stamp duty. So everything is adjustable, and we've done that based on feedback from fleet managers in the past. So for today's example, I'm going to use 2 Hyundai vehicles. I'm going to use the Ioniq, and I'm going to use the i30. Now, I've chosen these vehicles because the I-30 is traditionally a government fleet vehicle. It's used quite positively in fleets in Australia, and it is the like-for-like comparison that I can make at the moment for these two cars, one being electric and one being petrol. So the next stage is I come up with this little table here. Now you'll see that I've got operational lease terms here are the same. We're going to adjust that in a minute because it's likely you're probably using a 3-year lease term. But what you can see is a very easy to read breakdown of TCO comparison. So you can see there you've got the TCO per kilometre of an electric vehicle and a Hyundai i30 vehicle. And I think that's really important to consider, and going back to Martin's point of, you know, we are measuring over total cost of ownership, right? We're not actually considering two vehicles on their upfront price. And when you look at it like that, it's actually not a significant difference when you include the other benefits that you have from procuring electric vehicles for your fleet. Now, for each vehicle, as I said earlier, I have the option to customize the input data. So if you have different methodology for procurement, if you have your own figure that you want to manually enter for servicing and maintenance, if you know what your residual values are, if you know that your operational lease term for a petrol car is likely 3 years, not 5, then we might input that. We'll save the scenario, and we'll see then that actually our operational costs go up. Sorry, I keep clicking. It's one thing that annoys me here. You'll see that it goes up. And so when we actually compare these two vehicles over their operational lease terms, it's not a significant difference %, right? But then when you look at the tailpipe emissions and you look at well-to-wheel emissions, you are making significant advances in carbon emissions reductions just through a vehicle. The business case part comes now. So, but after I've optimized all of these vehicles, and actually I would just like to show you here, charging equipment. So people often say to us, you know, it's all well and good to get a car, but then I have to install charging infrastructure. You know, am I getting one charger per vehicle, or how do I do it? What do I do? What we have included now as a result of that conversation is the ability to include the charging cost in your total cost of ownership. So you can include the capital cost, the operational costs, and the asset life. And what the tool will do is aggregate a portion of that cost to a vehicle. So if you're looking at this one vehicle and you get 10 of them, you can allocate a percentage of that so that you are not measuring the full price of charging infrastructure as a single asset to one car. Now, as I said, we'll end up now with a business case. And here we are. So we've created a downloadable report so that within 15 minutes, you can print this off, go to, if you're a sustainability manager, your fleet manager. If you're a fleet manager, go to your executive. And you've got something tangible with correct Australian data to feed through to your colleagues and anyone else that needs to see what the business case for electrification is. There's graphs that demonstrate, you know, visibility in what the difference is between those two vehicles. And, you know, I've only input 2 cars here, but you can input up to as many as you like. You know, if you want to measure an i30 and then you want to look at an Ioniq, a Leaf, a Tesla, you really can do that. It's just for the sake of today, I thought, let's keep it simple, let's keep it short. So looking at these different pieces of information, you can really gauge that an electric vehicle isn't just about the upfront purchase cost. It's about what's the operational benefit. It's about what's the total cost of ownership savings. And it's about what are you demonstrating by buying an electric vehicle, and what are you doing from an environmental perspective. So why now? And, you know, are you going to be the first? Likely not. But what we are seeing in Australia is that local governments are leading the way in every sense of the word for charging infrastructure, EV procurement, you know, customised vehicles, commitments to electric vehicles nationally. You've got councils that have been operating EVs in fleets since 2012. You've got garbage trucks. You've got public-led charging infrastructure strategies. You've got regional fleets that are supporting electrification. So the change is really already underway, and it's just a case of, how can you now use this tool to optimize and accelerate your transition and procurement of electric vehicles in your fleets. These are just some of the ways you can keep involved in the Charge Together Fleets program. So join the program, you'll get invitations to webinars. We regularly send news updates. If you join our LinkedIn community, then you'll get access to information from the EV industry and other things. EV Counts, obviously, we're owners of the Charge Together Fleets program, but we do other policy work, and there's a lot of information out there from a non-fleet perspective if you are really interested in EVs. Our resources page has lots of reports, media releases, and information that can support, the messaging that you really want to put across to whoever you might need to. Work with the council organisations, IPWEA, Cities Power Partnership, but also the Local Government Association of South Australia is so positive and forward thinking and really driving change in your state. Work with them, tell them what you need, and, let them help you get what you need. It's been a really positive experience for me working with Jane and Martin, seeing what they really want to do to try transition, and to have such passionate and dedicated people on board with what's happening is really good to see, but take advantage of it. Not everyone has access to that. And finally, collaborate. So one of the things that I really want to do in the next couple of months is facilitate knowledge sharing across councils. So through the Charge Together Fleets program, I'm currently creating a resource pack, and that is really about talking to councillors who have already achieved something in the EV world, putting it into a step process, and then putting that into a platform so that everyone can share and, gain access to the same information. If you have any questions that you don't want to ask now in the Q&A session, then please feel free to get in touch. I'm always happy to help, and, if it's not now and it's in a couple of months, well, that's just as well. I'll be there too. Thanks, guys.
Cool, thanks, Alex. Yeah, that was really great, and some really fantastic points there. And I think probably the one of your last ones is really important. Is that collaboration is going to be key to getting electric vehicles into mainstream council activities, and now more than ever, I think, especially in the areas of infrastructure and services that councils deliver for the communities, as well as pool cars and public transport fleets. It really is now a conversation that needs to be had through the fleet manager in consultation and partnership really with the environmental and sustainability staff in councils to really get a decent loud conversation happening where it's a joint approach, so that everyone understands that this is bigger than just an individual fleet manager or a sustainability officer trying to push for change. This is the way of the future, and this is where larger transport companies have done significant investigation to make sure that they are on the cusp of looking at how they're going to implement electric vehicles and how they're going to change to support the reduction in the carbon footprint as well. And from an organisational point of view, LGA Procurement really needs you to understand that you're not alone. We're here to support you. And that's right through from your business case through to ordering the vehicles and delivery. We've got consultants on board that can assess your existing capacity of charging vehicles with your current solar infrastructure, but can also help you plan what you need to look for as your electric vehicle rollout continues. And we're also here as an organisation to support you with the culture change that's required to effectively implement these different vehicles and tools as well. So it's the support is there for you. We're more than happy for any questions or ideas that you need to run past us to make sure that the conversation's consistent and we're really getting resources that can support the sector's desire to support councils in these climate emergency declarations and reducing carbon footprints as well. So I might just throw open to a few questions. We've got some time. Does anybody have a question that I'd like to ask Alex? Cool. So I've got a couple here in the messaging here. So the we had a really interesting conversation with a couple of the suppliers around the trade-in values on electric vehicles as well. So one of the heavy vehicle suppliers has actually been working for quite a while with the Insurance Council of Australia, who have recognised that the trade-in value of electric trucks in particular is going to be consistent with what we're currently seeing with the diesel versions at the present day. How that becomes particularly relevant is that, you know, the question was put is, well, what's a diesel truck going to be worth in 10 years' time when there are more electric vehicles out on the road? So, you know, without the benefit of a good crystal ball, I would suggest that any kind of fossil fuel burning vehicle in 10 years' time is going to be going to be worth significantly less than a comparable electric vehicle, just because of the environmental impact that the disposal and recycling of that asset has, which will likely significantly exceed that of the electric vehicles. So the charging infrastructure is another question that's come through. So that varies from passenger vehicles through to the heavy vehicles as well, depending on the manufacturer. So what we're planning to do is another e-session in the next couple of weeks around charging infrastructure and the different opportunities that are there. So you'll have opportunity to hear from one of our business partners in JetCharge, who supply all the major brands with their charging infrastructure, but also a local South Australian firm that are doing some really innovative stuff in terms of solar collection. So this firm's responsible for all the solar shade structures that are at the shopping centres that everyone would likely see rolling out along the place, and they can actually support how that dovetails into, you know, council redevelopment of depots and library car parking spaces as well. So yeah, stay tuned for the next couple of weeks for that one. Where are we here? Maybe Alex, you might be able to help out. Does the assessment tool actually cover purchase of the vehicles as opposed to leasing? We have a lot of councils that purchase outright.
Yeah, so on the tool, when we were optimising the vehicles themselves and changing the setting, there's an option there that you can purchase the vehicle, and that's because, as we know, a lot of councils do buy the vehicles, they don't lease them. So that's definitely a customisable option. Cool,
thank you. The other conversation is also you know, quite important, is the retention of your assets and how do they dovetail in, and what sort of lifespan should you have on those assets. So what we're hearing from our interstate counterparts who are a little bit more advanced in implementing electric vehicles is that they're retaining the assets for probably 25% longer than a normal fossil fuel vehicle, only because there's less wear and tear and servicing costs on those vehicles as well. So like Alex quite rightly said, the typical lease time for a vehicle has gone from 3 years to 5 years. We should be seeing that the heavy vehicles that are electric vehicles, there's a 10-year guarantee on the output of the battery packs in those vehicles. So you start looking at, you know, a lot of the regional councils retain their heavy vehicles for 10 years, a lot of the metros not so long, but certainly the comments and conversations around the electric vehicles is the retention period can be extended by quite a significant amount, just through the less wear and tear and maintenance costs through not having those fossil fuel inputs in them as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, actually, Moreland City Council, I'm sure you guys have all heard of being in the fleet world, but they've got electric vehicles at the moment that they think they're going to have for 7 to 9 years, which means that they're going to be making back on that. They'll have completely covered the investment for that vehicle, and they don't even foresee that at that point in time they'll have to replace the vehicle, because the technology is being updated and it's supported by infrastructure and asset development that facilitates the continued use of them. So manufacturers know that they have to, you know, really make the case to fleet managers for why an electric vehicle will work, and the longevity and use opportunity of that vehicle and the way it's utilised and optimised over a longer period of time is really where its strengths lie. As you said, you know, it's got lower servicing and maintenance, but it is just lasting longer. I mean, you might not have Tesla vehicles in your fleets, but they're lasting, you know, they're going to have a 1 million mile battery in a couple of years. So as you consider getting electric vehicles, also consider that, yeah, as we said, you know, the use of diesel is going down, but the technology of electric vehicles is also ever getting better. So what you have now is the best that you can have now, but in 5 years, it will be bigger and it will be better. So leading the charge on that means that you're ahead of the curve, and, you know, you've got data and experience and insight to really accelerate what you can do in the next 5 years.
Cool, thank you. There's one other question just before we move on to Chris Dunn from Port Adelaide Enfield, just around the state government's green hydrogen strategy.
Sure.
Hydrogen fueling has been, pretty quite a current sort of conversation into the different fleet networks. Challenges around that are, quite rightly, as the question sort of goes in to explain that the infrastructure required for refueling, the availability for refueling stations as well. So I think we're going to be quite a while off for being able to go down that hydrogen path. The strategy is there and it's in place, but I think the evidence and the vehicles are there now for the 100% electric side of things. I think as the hydrogen conversation progresses, I think we're going to be quite a way off before we're actually in quite a commercial operation for being able to support that in a common circumstance in councils as well. Where are we here? So we've got another question. So rural councils, just questions about battery life on vehicles as well. So the range depends largely on the type of vehicle that you're buying as well, and you'll see that when you do your research. So the Teslas are obviously at the extreme end of the conversation, where they're getting 400 to 500 Ks depending on the battery pack that you order with that. The other vehicles, I don't have the data in front of me, but I know that depending on the vehicle, if it's a hybrid vehicle, obviously you've got a fuel engine as backup. But the electric vehicles are commonly, between 200 and 350 kilometres that you can comfortably get range out of them. The heavy vehicles, in particular the trucks. So from the tour that we did over to the factory, that is one significant factor in the trucks, is they've got a massive improvement in the battery technology, which has supported increased mileage out of those trucks. So you're commonly seeing, depending on the battery pack of those trucks, between 180 and 350 to 400 kilometres out of a charge for a truck as well. So there's a number of different behaviours that can change to support even more increased mileage if you need to. For instance, if the guys are out in a truck in a regional community and there's a charging station, well, they'll be plugging that charging truck into the charging station while they're doing whatever activity they have, just to top up that battery so that they're able to cover even more kilometres than that single charge. There is a number of other ways that you can support the increased distance, but yeah, that's really up to the individual council to consider their needs and how that is appropriate to them. There's another question about standard mechanics. Do they have the capability to service electric vehicles? The short answer to that is yes. From the contact we've had specifically with the heavy vehicle side of things, they are servicing their heavy vehicles once a year, and it's more a safety check as opposed to any actual maintenance that needs to be done. As far as the electric vehicles, I'll commit to getting back to you about the passenger vehicle side of things, how that varies for
I can answer that actually.
Yeah, cool.
So at the moment, the OEMs themselves are servicing the vehicles. They have a train the trainer program where they'll either come to you to service your electric vehicle, or you'll take it back to the dealer where you bought it. Each dealership that's selling an electric vehicle will have an on-site mechanic. But what will be different within council is if you have mechanics hired by council, they will not be encouraged to service that vehicle, battery electric and plug-in hybrid electric, and that's because you're now dealing with a very high voltage battery. So the car manufacturers will ask you to take the car back to where you bought it from and then use their service mechanics. Now, something that the industry is considering in the next 12 months to 18 months is, how are we going to upskill local mechanics so that they can work on electric vehicles? But it's quite important that the skilled mechanics are working on cars at the moment so that we really aren't creating any safety obstacles in terms of the adoption of electric vehicles, and just, managing general things like servicing and tyres. As I said, often the OEM will come to you if you're living in a regional rural area as well.
Thank you. All right, so with that, we might hand over to Chris Dunn. So Chris was one of our attendees on our recent field trip over to Melbourne to have a look at the SEA factory. So Chris is the first council in South Australia that's actually travelled down that 100% electric heavy vehicle route. So it'd be really interesting to hear about Chris's experience and some of the challenges that he had. Chris has also offered, for others to be able to contact him if they'd like to have a conversation about some of the intricacies of how we approached it and how he is able to get across the line to start that implementation. So really appreciate your time, Chris. Good to see you again, and over to you.
Thanks, Martin. I'll just preface by saying that we've got a very supportive elected member body and also CEO, which has made this journey, even though it's been a little bit of a journey, but it's made it quite easy. The cell hasn't been too difficult in terms of getting people on side. Our mayor has a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. We've just installed, probably a couple of months ago, our first 22 kilowatt charging station, and the mayor plugs into that every day. So it's a two plug charging station there. We've got another one going in at Largs Bay as well, that are both available to the public. We have signed an agreement with Jolt to, alongside with Marion and Charles Sturt councils, for about another 15 to 20 charging stations to be installed at no cost to us around the city, because they make money out of the advertising, like bus stops. So we've got a commitment from the council. I put a report up in late last year to get their support on electric vehicles and moving to an electric vehicle fleet, which is good. So we've got one fully electric commuter vehicle from next year, and then 3 the year after, and then just building on that. So I'm just going to give a very brief summary. It's only going to be 5 to 10 minutes. I was lucky enough to get across to Dandenong with the LGA, and I reckon about 18 other councils. And we got to see the factory over there. It was just before COVID got really bad, so we were lucky enough to see that. And that was a really good insight of just seeing what these trucks were capable of. The City of Yarra were the first one to have a tipper truck. I think it was late last year, October, November last year, they got it. The actual drivers of the tipper truck were there as well. So even though they were giving a presentation, I had an opportunity to have a quiet chat to them on the side about some of their real honest opinions about the electric truck, and it was nothing but good news. Even the driver himself of the tipper truck from City of Yarra said he was a skeptic at first, but he had people stopping him in the street saying, "Oh, this is amazing, it's so quiet. It's great to see your council being such a green council." So it was really refreshing to hear that sort of response. You can go to the next slide. I just wanted to just set the scene, and Alex has set the scene quite well, but I just wanted to, just 1900 in New York City. It's all pretty much horses. If you just click the next button, you can see there's one car in that picture in 1900, and then if you click again, 13 years later, there's one horse. So we're on the cusp of change, and we are moving to electric vehicles. They are coming, and we need to think about it now, particularly with our truck fleets. If you think about it now, in 10 years' time, electric vehicles will be dominating the market. I know Australia is a little bit behind the rest of the world, but now is the time to think about electric vehicles in our fleet. If we just click the button again, I think there's a graph. Well, there's the horse, but there's a graph there. If we just click again, it's a little bit small, but you can see the take-up. 2020 is that first circle in the bottom x-axis, and you can see the take-up 2030. In South Australia, in Australia, we're looking at 40% electric vehicles. In Europe, it's more like 80 or 90 in 10 years' time. By 2040, that gets huge again. So I know that's light vehicle sales, but I think it's important to be aware that we are on the cusp of change. So the total cost of ownership is typically lower than the diesel trucks. That is based on a certain amount of kilometres per day. So in our example, you really need to have about 125 kilometres per day to break even for an electric truck. We've done a lot of back and forth with C Electric to look at where that break even point was. Now ours that we're doing, it's only about 70 or 80 kilometres per day. But it's not just financials itself. We need to have a look at how it stacks up from a sustainability point of view, a resale of the diesel truck after 10 years, aligning with our greenhouse emission policies, our green sustainability policies. I went for a drive in one of these electric trucks and they're so quiet, and the acceleration was fantastic. You don't have the bumpy acceleration from a diesel truck that you get. It took off really quickly. I was a little bit surprised. They went out onto the main road with one of these electric trucks, and I thought, oh, geez, they're pulling in front of a car that's actually moving quite quickly, but the acceleration was just amazing. A lot less maintenance on an electric truck versus a diesel truck. And as I said before, there's about an 8 to 10 year payback on this from a financial perspective on 125 kilometres per day. And that's based on dirty electricity. So if you've got solar or if you've got batteries, then it's going to be even better off. So C Electric have got an amazing Excel spreadsheet that they use to actually work out where that sort of balance is and what those sort of costs are, and working out what it costs over the life of a truck. And I think Martin touched on it a little bit earlier, that an electric truck still has about 80% of its battery life after 10 years. So there still is life on an electric truck after 10 years, but the actual body is starting to wear, the interior is starting to wear, as you're well aware, after that time. But you don't need to throw those batteries away after 10 years. There's probably, we don't know what's going to be happening in 10 years' time, but there probably is a market for those batteries after that time. We don't need to put in charging stations straight away. It can be charged via 3-phase power. So for around about probably up to about 5 trucks at the depot, it can be charged. Well, ours is going to be charged down at our Largs North depot. You don't need chargers. Yeah, once you get over 5, you probably do. It needs a bit of an assessment from an electricity point of view, but the charging is usually done overnight, so it shouldn't be an issue for quite a period of time. If we just go to the next slide. As I talked and touched on briefly earlier, the PR value on an electric truck is great. The City of Yarra were just raving about it. East West have got their electric garbage truck, and I think that's where the real benefits are in terms of noise. They're always moving around and braking hard and accelerating hard early in the morning. And I know East West here in Adelaide have had some good success with that. There's a good opportunity to market and brand the trucks. So you can see that Woolworths truck there that actually came in at the time for a service when we were there. Now that's actually a refrigerated truck, and they only get around about 100 kilometres range on their trucks. However, they've got a self-charging mechanism inside the truck that is able to charge for longer periods because of refrigeration. So the range for the trucks around about 180 to 300 kilometres. I know that's a fairly big sort of range number in there, but it depends on the size of the engine, well, not the engine, the motor, the electric motor, and also the towing requirements. For the truck that we're getting, it's going to be for our sign equipment and also our line marking equipment. So it'll be two requirements. So we needed to make sure that it did have some towing capacity to actually tow the line marking machine behind it. In terms of procurement, you can have a chat to See Electric, but really all the procurement needs to be done through who you actually approach for the other trucks. So, but I did find out since then that Hino are the only ones that offer the fully electric truck at this stage. So See Electric partner with Hino. So you don't need to deal with See Electric if you don't want to, or SEA Electric. You just need to approach Hino and the people that you've been using at Hino, and they'll be able to help you get this over the line. With that, Hino were a little bit, I suppose, in the dark a little bit at the first, when we sort of first discussed this, but now they're online and they're really supportive of us doing this. As I said before, it's just great for sustainability and aligning with our policies and our city plan. And diesel prices are just going to keep increasing. Just have a look at the next slide. So again, it's been taken up and been supported by our CEO based on policies alone. I really went through a brief presentation similar to this in sort of selling it to our CEO. The hard work had been done previously when we've already got our elected members signed up to a electric vehicle transition for our fleet and our policies, and really this is just part of that. So if you're wanting to go on that electric vehicle journey, I think the first thing to do is actually to bring everyone online in terms of elected members prior with probably a council workshop and then a council report, so that you do have that buy-in, and if anyone questions it and that gets through council, you can just refer back to that. I talked about the storage and the towing requirements and the acceleration, and we will probably get ours maybe just before Christmas. It's a bit of a hold up. This has been taken up around Australia quite quickly. So it's about a 7-month wait until, I suppose, when we place the order and then get the truck. So that's been our journey. Welcome to answer any questions along the way.
Thanks, Chris. That was really great. We do have some questions in the chat, and I think the best way to manage some of those is to set up a frequently asked questions sheet, which we do after all our webinars. So I'll be working on that today. Alex, you had a couple of things you wanted to jump in and say.
So I just wanted to mention for everyone that wants to use the Better Fleet tool, once you sign up, there's the option for a free demo. So we'll email you and ask if you want a demo. Seems like we're pushing a product. We're not. We just, really want to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles. So there'll be someone available to take you through a half-an-hour demo of, how can you input your fleet data to optimize results and things like that. And yeah, again, happy to take any other questions.
That's fabulous. Thank you. There's 2 ways you can get in touch with us with questions. LGA Procurement team are here to help you, as Martin said. So we have a direct email account that you can send anything to that you like, procurement questions. Questions we do receive about electric vehicles, if we think they're of general nature and not too much customised to your council, we will email everyone in this session so that they can see the information that's being distributed, and also we'll include it in the frequently asked questions document. We've also got Alex's email on the screen for you. Just a couple of other things we wanted to touch base on for you. Obviously we're here on the end of the phone and email. It's a busy time of year, we know, and COVID didn't help. We're all being stretched. We know that you guys are in the middle of having budgets approved, etc. But we are here to help you. We've got tools available online, a fantastic team who can help you with any phase of your project. So that's our plug to you, that we're here to help you in your communities. Also, just finalising some details with another webinar to continue this conversation that we're all having and really invested in regarding electric vehicles and anything electric, as I like to say. So we're hoping to get on board 2 of our suppliers in the next couple of weeks to follow this along. I'll email you all information and it will be included in the latest news. If you don't receive the latest news on the LGA, just pop onto the LGA website and subscribe. We also have an e-newsletter that we send out regularly, so check that, subscribe to that, and you'll be up to date. Please feel free to add questions to the chat room. I'll keep that going. This ends our session today, but as I said, although the videos will be off, you can add some more questions to that or email us direct. I'd like to say thank you to Alex and also to Chris Dunn and Martin.
Thanks for having me, guys.